It's a pleasure and a privilege to be here at the SHSMD Connections Conference for 2018. My presentation today is about culture and culture change. And the question that we'll be asking is, are you challenged by your organization's culture? And are you finding defiance? People saying, sure, we have to change, but not actually changing. And how can you turn that defiance into delight? Through a culture change process. Maybe people just don't know how to change. So the agenda for today's presentation is, first, what is your organization's culture today that you're trying to change? Is it working? How do you know it's working or not working? Why do you want to change it? What would you prefer to become? And when? And why? And think about culture as something that's all-encompassing. Are there tools that can help? Processes that will work, that could really help get an organization on board with a culture change process? And we are big fans of the Organizational Culture Assessment Instrument. We're consultants with the group in the Netherlands that have the license to use it. And could that be a tool that you could use, and what would it do for you? And we've developed a change map process that helps your organization's culture change and stick. The three key takeaways that I hope you walk away with: first is that culture isn't that suit you put on in the morning to come to work. It's really the essence of who you are. And birds of a feather flock together. You come together with others who are like you. We'll talk more about this. But it isn't casual, and it's essential. And if you don't create a culture, people will make one up, because they are humans and they like to live with one. And that change needs a process. The second is that there are well-researched and highly validated methods for doing this. And the third takeaway is, for a culture change process to stick, you really have to build small wins and keep explaining why until the new replaces the old. If not, people will go back to where they are most comfortable. I want you to think about this like I often think about it. When I met my husband 52 years ago, he had a 1957 Mercedes 190 SL with red leather seats, just like this. I want you to think about your favorite dream car. Think about it as if that's your culture, what you really, really love. It's something that makes you feel so special and so comfortable. And that's exactly what it made us all feel. It was a pretty cool car. Of course, it didn't always work so well. But when I met my husband, it meant that if I wanted to drive this very special car, I had to learn how to drive a stick shift. Now, as I'm saying this, I'm wondering how many of you in the audience have ever driven a stick shift? How many of you had a car that you owned that has a stick shift? My daughter actually still has a Subaru with a stick shift. But if I want to buy a car today with a stick shift, I need to actually special order it. So I hope you guys remember the joy or agony of learning how to drive a stick shift, because that picture is exactly what it was like. You had to put your foot on the clutch, take your left foot on the clutch, the right foot you had to put on the accelerator, just enough to put it into reverse. And then you had to do the brake, the clutch, take it out of gear, and then little gas and put it into first. And then you'd feel yourself going along. You had to put your foot on the thing, pull it back, and then the gas, and you were in second. And that's how we really drove cars. And it was very exciting to drive that car. Then we went on our honeymoon to England, and I had to figure out how to do that all over again, sitting on the right side with the other hand working on that clutch. I share that with you because that's the feeling you have when you're trying to change a culture. First, I have to learn this one and figure out how to move my left foot and my right foot and begin to get my hands all in gear. And now I got it down really pat, and I'm driving along. And now you want me to drive on the other side of the road with the other hand using that shift, and everything is backwards? Or maybe if you're in England, that's the way we do it. I almost drove into a lake. I remember it vividly. But I figured out how to drive on both sides. I try not to do that too often in England now. But this is what it feels like when you are changing your culture. You have to create a business impact map. and conduct a workshop and conduct risk assessment and refine the risk origins and scope of your organization, the job to be done, the business culture, the skills, the incentives. You have to review action plans for change. You need to build a team and get their spirit up, optimize it, get buy-in, and communicate it. How do you do this? When you're really very comfortable driving that car on the right side of the road, not the left side of the road, not the wrong side of the road. You guys facing? Are you facing generational differences? Do you know that the Gen Zs that are entering college today have an 8-second attention span? They spend 3 hours a day on a computer. Their parents often are those Gen Y, are their Gen Xs, sometimes the Gen Ys, and they are very much, they've grown up digital. They expect to get an appointment with a doctor. They aren't terribly interested in relationships. They'll take their son or daughter or themselves to an urgent care center, and then they'll shop the urgent care centers that have the shortest lines or open the rest hours. Boomers have relationships with their doctor. They wait 3 weeks to get an appointment. Gen Ys don't want to wait a day. They want to get their answer to a question now, and they'll go and ask Alexa, Siri, or their friends, or go on WebMD. The world is changing and demography is destiny. How are you changing to adapt to it? Then, for your own physicians and their staff, how do they use technology? They are all different in how comfortable they are with it, including things like ZocDoc, or having appointments scheduled online, or having patients ask questions, or having to tell a patient on their cell phone what you've just prescribed for them, so they walk away with something on that cell phone that is the doctor's words. The speed at which they work is very different. Their essence is very different. And then we've been working with clients, healthcare clients, who have been part of mergers or acquisitions. And that changes everything. Everything you thought was sacred is now being called into question. And in one case, a multi-specialty group that we've been working with, the doctors who thought the acquisition was really going to make it easier for them has just created new rules for them. And where they used to be able to fix something in their office without going through facilities, now they have to go through facilities. Or if they used to be able to hire or fire somebody without going through HR, now they have to go through HR. And they're not quite sure they like the new rules. They do like the pie out. Everything is full of ambiguity. What happens next? And then there's artificial intelligence and all kinds of new machine learning and all kinds of new technology that are changing the patient and the doctor. I mean, are there virtual healthcare assistants? And are there ways that Watson can better indicate for them what the diagnosis ought to be? And are there monotonous tasks that can be done by those machines differently? What about chatbots? And are the robots coming? I know we've all seen the Da Vinci robot, but robots are going to perhaps be the nurse of tomorrow. Maybe the robots are going to help you get your job done more efficiently and perhaps even more effectively. On the other side, there's a whole diverse workforce. They're multi-ethnic, they're multicultural, multiracial. They all belong to different clubs and groups and churches on the outside, and they come together at work to form a community that doesn't necessarily share the same values, beliefs, and behaviors. Their body languages are different. And in fact, they all believe that what they do is sacred and pure and purposeful and the right way to do things. And then outside, the culture is changing. Both demography, but also the community that you're serving. It may be changing in their healthcare needs. Maybe aging and those healthcare needs are changing. It may be a gentrification. We work with the mental health centers of Denver, and one of the areas in which they had put one of their mental health centers is gentrifying. And the community that they were serving is moving into other communities. And now, what will they do with their center and how will they serve that community? it becomes very interesting to watch mental health. 30% of Americans are depressed. Where does behavioral health fit into this program, inside and outside? And as we saw in the keynote yesterday, the technology is becoming the driver to enable us to provide health and health care completely differently. All of this comes down to culture. What is culture anyhow? Culture is the way you as a human actually think, act, and interact. The piece about humans that's so amazing is this thing called culture. The senses, the multisensory ability. Remember, we're born half cooked. We come out, we can't walk, we can't talk. We really don't know what's right from wrong. We know how to cry, we know how to get our diaper changed, and we spend about 30 years becoming real humans that are part of other groups that get along. Successful organizations have particular attributes. They have cultures that reduce uncertainties. Humans do not like outliers. They do not like whistleblowers. They do not want uncertainties. They want to come up every day and do the same thing they did yesterday. Most people work to make a living. They do not live to work, and they do not live to change. Most CEOs know how to run a company, not necessarily change it. Successful organizations, though, have a social order. People know what to expect. They have continuity, values, and norms that people embrace as the way we do things here. Every client brings us in, and the first thing they say is, we need to change. And the second thing they said is, this is the way we do it here. No, we can't do that. What a culture does is create continuity and values and norms, which were really fine over the last 2 or 3 decades, where everything was pretty stable and hospitals had their share of the market. Now everything is changing. When they reversed that hierarchy and the technology became the bottom, not the top, everything became transformative. The idea now is that culture used to create a collective identity, a commitment to that identity. That's the way that we are different. Expresses a vision of the future, energizes forward movement. Do not underestimate how it creates that visualization so people have a sense of where we're going. The brain is a movie set. It's a visualizer. It needs to know what we are doing and why. But the clash of cultures can take you down the wrong road, and the need to change them isn't incidental. It's essential. People, by and large, are unaware of their culture until it's challenged in some fashion. When somebody says, no, we're not going to do that anymore, it becomes, really? Then what will I do? They may even say to you, of course, and then go back to do what they used to. Sometimes they experience a new culture. Often, a physician or a staff member from one hospital leaves and joins another. And they realize that what they used to do isn't what we've done here. Sometimes they go back and do it anyhow. But, you know, when I went from Montefiore Medical Center, essentially a Jewish hospital, to St. Joe's Regional Medical Center, run by the Sisters of Charity, healthcare was delivered in 2 very different cultural ways. Or the culture is made overt and explicit through some particularly good framework or model, our OCAI, that I want to talk about today. You must remember that organizational culture, like humans, hate change. The values, beliefs, and behaviors we recognize as the way we do things becomes sacred. It becomes the truth. And I love Tony Robbins. Change happens when the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of change. Humans hate to change. Why is it so hard to see what's right in front of you? That we're going to have to do this differently. That access isn't incidental, that it's essential. That the technology is becoming a really cool way to manage diabetes. That you don't have to do it the same way you always did. Well, the first part is the way we see ourselves. We look in the mirror and we see a hero. We're all those big lions, not little pussycats. Anise Nin, the diarist from France, said, we don't see things as they are. We see things as we are. And we look in the mirror see a hero, and spend our lives looking for others who look like us. There's wonderful research by Margaret Heffernan that we look for others to marry, to play with, to be along with. Then we have the comfort of the herd, our culture. This is not an incidental picture, because if you look over your organization, you're going to see herds, groups of people who sit together at lunch, and they all share common values, beliefs, and ways of thinking about things. Excuse me. Habits. We all talk about habits, but the habits are the most efficient way for the brain to get things done. The habits drive you. We think that we're full of free will. The brain works most efficiently. It uses 25% of your body's energy, and the habits make it work best. And last, the brain hates change. That cortex and prefrontal cortex would be much happier if it doesn't have to work too hard. It literally creates change, pain in the brain. The chemistry says, stop, please. I'm very miserly. I don't need to learn anything new. So then, if that's all fighting you, how are you going to change people? With all of this resistance, you now need to change the culture. Why? And how do you do it? People, the research tells us, will change my mind and my behaviors if I see my leaders, colleagues, and staff behaving differently. That comes from the fact that we're monkeys. We mirror each other unconsciously, and we bond that way. But as mimics, I want to know who I'm going to mimic, imitate, and behaviorally change to match. If your leaders, your friends, your colleagues, and staff don't change, I'm not going to be the outlier. Belonging is more important than being good. I'll change my mind and those behaviors if I really understand what's being asked of me and it makes sense. So I've got to be explained to over and over again. And I need to see congruence between what they believe and what they have to change. If nobody else is doing it, there's no purpose to it. It's not a pilot. I have no metrics. Why matters a lot. They also need the skills to develop. So I'll change my mind and my behaviors if you develop my talent and my skills. Old dogs can learn new tricks, but you have to invest in them. Show them how. It's a little bit like they're going to learn a new game. They've been excellent tennis players, and now you want them to play golf. Think about it. You can't give them a club and a book and say, hit the ball. It won't work. Most important, I'm going to change my mind and my behaviors if I see you changing the organization's structures. Something physical has to happen here. It can't be just words. You're going to have to change the way we hold meetings. You're going to change the way how we open our appointments and manage them and respond to clients or patients or even our providers, our referrers. We're going to change something. Those are the ways we do things. And the tension between the generations, between the Gen Ys, we work with anesthesiology group in New Jersey, and the Gen Ys and the boomers couldn't talk to each other. One wanted to work all the time and take as much call as they could take and build their pensions. And the others wanted to work 9 to 5 and go home and be with their family. Very different ways of doing things. The rewards and recognition aren't what drive it, a part of it. There's a support for it. And the symbols and ways we celebrate the achievements are extremely important. Humans love celebrations. Then they become part of a new entity. It's very interesting. It isn't the words that we say or even the behaviors that we're beginning to change. It's how does it feel? What are we celebrating? How are we rewarded? What's the new story? So what are we going to do? We're going to start by capturing a picture of the culture today and the one for tomorrow. We use this tool called the Organizational Culture Assessment Instrument, OCAI. It was developed through extremely good research by the University of Michigan, by Dr. Kim Cameron and Dr. Robert Quinn. There are over 10,000 organizations that have used it. What does it do? After great research, and some of my anthropology colleagues probably would say, no way, they came up with basically the fact that organizations, by and large, have four dominant types of cultures. And they have differences in how they are glued together, what the basic way of doing things are. What do they value? How do they lead? What is a strategy? And what is success? The essence of what a culture is. So I'll take this from the top right and go around because you're going to think about them differently. And I'll tell you some stories as we go through this about clients of ours who have been going through culture change. The creative is very ad hoc. It's all focused on the outside. It very much wants to be the leading edge. It's got a visionary for a leader, a great deal of empowerment. And the people operate with a great deal of autonomy. And they're looking for new ways to do things. They're very innovative. The opposite of that is on the left, the controlling hierarchy, internally focused, looking for smoothing activities, integration, control, order, and stability. A hierarchy, think of the hierarchy as the post office, the civil service, the banks, highly regulated, lots of organization, efficient, good manufacturing. I worked with a cement manufacturing company in Mexico, and they were hierarchical to an extreme. They just couldn't hire any new people because the new people were very ad hoc, creative, young, and didn't want to work in a hierarchical society. So you have entrepreneurs on the one side and hierarchy and controls on the other. On my top left are the collaboratives. They're a clan. Think of them as family firms. I spoke at the Family Firm Institute, and everyone who did this ended up there except the banks that were in the hierarchy. The clans are very human-focused. They care about each other. Team is the essence, consensus-driven, father-like mentors. The only problem is sometimes they have trouble making decisions. I worked with one family firm. They had 49 family members working there. That may not be the world that you're in, but you may have very clannish, cooperative, collaborative consensus building. And I remember when I first worked in healthcare, the folks used to meet, but there were never any agendas or takeaways. The meeting was our gathering. And Ford Motors has had to go through a cultural redesign because they were so consensus driven. They'd have 30 people at a meeting and no decisions were made. So this can be good or bad. And then the competition. Competing is a very interesting and important part of this. They're really focused on market share. They're looking at competition, and they're really looking on how to beat out that competition. They are very much into an external positioning. And they have to build by competing and taking away share from others. Sometimes it's an extreme. We worked with one commodities trader, and they made a fortune but couldn't get along. And no innovation was needed. They knew exactly what they had to do it. What does this have to do for you? Well, if you took a look and did the OCAI, I think that an email was sent out in advance. You might have taken a look at what's the dominant characteristics, the leadership style and approach. Do you have a mentor, a facilitator, an enabler, or a driver? Management of employees, how are they treated? What's the work environment? What holds you together? What's your strategic emphasis? And the criteria of success. How is victory defined? Market share or how well we get along? Think about the changes that are coming, the technological changes, the demands by a new generation for easy access, not necessarily quality and relationships. What gets rewarded and celebrated? When you take the OCAI, what comes out is a graph. Looks like this. It's very image-driven because what you begin to see from the red is what you are today to the blue is what you would prefer to become. So you take 6 questions and you answer them twice. You have 100 points for each. And what you find is what I am now and what I would prefer to become. So if you look at this, the clan, collaborative, human resource oriented, we get along really well. For this organization, didn't want to change much at all. Maybe even a little bit. The adhocracy with lots of innovation and empowerment, oh my gosh, we're up 10 points here. We really have to change. We want more empowerment for the nurses at the bedside. We really want to create new ideas, innovative ways of handling triage in the emergency room. Well, very interesting. Then the market-driven, we want a little more competition, and we really do want to bring in new patients from new areas. And hierarchy, oh, please, can't we change the rules so that we have a little bit less control and processes are a little bit more flexible? The stories are important. This is focused on typical behaviors. So think about this for your own organization that you want to change. Taking it to the green. Are you creating a culture? Do you do new things? Change and test them. Innovate, build a vision, empower and allow risk. Or are you a very competitive culture who wants to do things fast, compete and deliver results? Are you hard driving? Are you customer centered? Or are you outdoing the competition? And this can be in subtle ways. Everybody yesterday was talking about data, the metrics. The gentleman from Lehigh Valley and how he was going to demonstrate that his marketing had an ROI by the data, by competing and delivering the results. Being creative, but being very results oriented. The controlling culture, there's nothing wrong to be controlled. You have joint commission, you have lots of regulations, you have to do things correctly. You have to structure workflows. You have to be patient safe. You have to make sure you wash your hands before you touch them. You have to build processes that support those and create reliability so you have no infections. Use data and analysis, but differently, and the rules might rule. There's nothing wrong with any one of these. And collaborating, you do things together, you build relationships, you have teamwork, you have engagement. There aren't any bad cultures. What we've learned by doing this, and there's 10,000 companies who have done it, is those management around the center tend to have the best results. They allow empowerment and creativity. They have a vision of where they're going, but they have the processes and rules to get the results that they need to bring in the kinds of customers or patients that they're looking for together. And they know how to balance these different types of cultural pieces. So let me share a client's story with you. This was a large healthcare system that we worked with that needed to change their culture. They're a chapter in my book. And at the time, they were going through some interesting changes, so we made them anonymous. They could be any company, any hospital. But they were a Midwestern hospital that needed to change. Their financials required a major turnaround. They were heavily unionized, and the silos needed bridges. But everyone had their own way of doing things. Think of the silos in a world of a culture where we do it this way, and you do it that way. And we have to go up the line and down. A complex multi-ethnic environment. 75% of the doctors were foreign-born. It was a very biracial community, and it was a very complicated culture inside for all different kinds of reasons. It was a safety net hospital serving the poor. It had exceptional physicians and programs. It was ready to become a children's hospital. But it knew that to survive and thrive, the culture of the past wasn't going to be the one for the future. I had 65% of 2,500 people take the OCAI. The pictures that came out were amazing. Overall, the staff basically agreed that they wanted more collaboration. Like maybe we could turn the beds faster if housekeeping came up when we called them because a discharged patient opened a bed and we could actually get it turned so someone in the ED can move faster. Well, that's not the way we do it here. More innovation. This was a very challenging one. What was more innovative? Were we going to have nurses at the bedside change the doctor's prescription? How are we going to do something innovatively? What did the word mean? We're going to have a little less control. So maybe we could team up to get something done on our own without asking permission. When I first worked with them, I had asked the chief medical officer, how could we do something differently in the emergency room? And he said, well, we have to go ask the CEO. And I said, but why? Could you recommend to the CEO? No, everything comes from him down. And somewhat less focused on competing, just a bit. Now, the house staff I put up here because um, they were really great, but they thought they were doing just fine. There was abundance of collaboration, controls, and competition. And this wasn't overwhelming. They wanted slightly more innovation and a little bit more empowerment. And this really was important because the board really agreed with the whole hospital, wanted a little bit more of innovation. Now, none of this was enormous, but the changes were challenging. You were challenging the essence of who that person was every day. It wasn't a task to perform. It was a way they had become very comfortable performing it. It goes much deeper. Their personal identity comes from their culture. Change was going to have to come from them. So how do we do this? How might you change your culture? Once you've got the OCAI, you need a process. So we developed a change map. Think of it as a Google map. You have to begin by making the undesirable desirable. Think of it as a visualization of where you're going. It's a destination. How are we going to increase access? What do we want to see happen with the marketing that's going to change the way people with prostate cancer concerns can get the care? How are we going to make the NICU the place to go? What are we going to do to make the undesirable desirable? Because the way we do things here. It's about creating a new story. We need to understand how the brain's going to fight this until it has a new movie set up there, a new story. It's how do we see, feel, think, and then do? How do we see it? If I don't see it, I don't know it. Then I have to create readiness. I know I'm going to have resistance to change. How do I get them ready for it? How we talk about the disadvantages of not changing. The pain of change has to be higher than the pleasures of staying the same. We're going to then visualize it. This is a new story. It's a new desirable, but I need a picture. And it's better if your staff draw it for you and with you. If they make the new story up, so often we have them talk about what the OCI seems to say about today's culture, and tell me a story, and tell me a story about what you would prefer it to be. What would innovation actually mean? How will we collaborate differently to be more innovative? If they create a story, you'd be amazed at how they can start to live it. Don't do it for them. Now, it's extremely important to develop their skills. A lot of applied self-learning and personal insights. The more they can do in their own learning process, the better it will be. We believe in small wins. Explain whys. Keep telling them why, because until they get that through, the respect that comes with it isn't communicated. So everything is over-determining success by over-explaining it. Small wins are like practice sessions. We talk about pilots. I like small wins. So if we are going to become a more innovative and collaborative organization, give me one thing we will do in the next 30 days that will demonstrate how we will do that. And then let's look at measures that show that it is better than what we're doing now. My goodness, if housekeeping and nursing can collaborate differently, we can move more people through our emergency room to get them into beds that generate more revenue and help our bottom line, but help the patient as well and help the ED not go on diversion. Find some things that are easy to change them, and then celebrate. Don't forget to applaud, and then do it again. Lots of small successes build up momentum, and practice makes perfect. Peer pressure. Identify the people who are going to undermine you. They're all over the place. Even when they tell you, yes, of course, we're going to do that, they immediately go and undermine why that's not a good idea, abort it. You have to specify time frames for the changes to take place, by which we are going to have everybody on doc for having automated appointments. And then design the follow-up and reporting events. Let them be the reporters. Don't let change be someday, because it will never happen. And remember, those who will undermine you can become the leaders in the transformation. That helps a lot. Over-communicate. You cannot tell them enough, and do it visually. Lots and lots of storytelling. Lots of success from the patient, the provider, the staff. Don't underestimate that office manager who can really be your hero. Share as much as you can on a regular basis, as broadly as possible. If there's no information, no storytelling, they will make one up where they're the hero. Align around the right measures of success. Identify criteria that will indicate successful change. What defines the data that matters now? If you keep looking at the old data, you might see some indications there, but maybe there's new indications. If there's access, what will be the right indicators that you have increased the flow and ease of people getting there? Or if you're looking at Lehigh Valley and you're looking at the data for your marketing, are you looking at the right? Is it how many visits to the website, or how many leads, or how many converted into patients or actually into treatments? What are you looking at? Because you really do need to monitor what you measure and then do what you're measuring. Funerals, symbolic of the respect you show for what you used to do and want to never do it again. Do not underestimate the power of having a celebration of the past that says that was the way we used to do it. We will not do it again. Bye. We respect you. And then we transition to the future. Symbols. Humans are sentient creatures. Our meaning is done through symbols. It isn't simply what we wear, it's how we're wearing it. We work with a bunch of urgy centers doing research. They were fascinating to me because the doctors had no business cards. The patients left not knowing who the doctor was that they saw. The doctors had become commoditized. Think carefully, is that what you're looking to achieve? Because if you don't change the symbols, they will change for you, and that's just what had happened. And identify the new symbols, because they happened there. Help them rally around the new. That wasn't hard to do, but was that what you wanted to do? We like to use change circles. 10 people at a time is a good number. People like to work with the safety of the coworkers that they know. It builds ownership and accountability. Engagement is visible. Personal support and time to learn and practice new ways of doing things matter a lot. So change is a process that you can do, but you need a process to do it. So I put this up as my change map. You start with the visual, the future. It's the end, but it's the beginning. If you think of this as a destination that you visualize, you can keep coming back to that story, that movie set, and tell people over and over again the same story. Make sure, like a brand, it's a story you want to create, and you're going to live that brand. There's lots of overlap here. You're changing so much when you're changing a culture. Because I've learned to live this way, and now you want me to do that. You're going to have to train and explain the power of why. Over-explain it and over-train it. Do not put people into a class and send them back among others who have not gone through the same class, because they'll go back to the old ways. They're not necessarily going to be whistleblowers or outliers or movers of change, unless you designate them to go back and be the trainers. You see one, you do one, you train one. It's not a bad model, but make sure you know what you're doing with them. Plan small wins to learn and test results. The power of small wins cannot be underestimated. It's really practice time. Harness the power of peer pressure. We're social creatures. We want to please each other. We want to see what they're doing. Watch those informal leaders do change circles. You'll find that the groups of 10 become their own storytellers, and they'll begin to tell the story you want them to tell. Over-communicate. You're going to have to over-determine success. Hold a funeral to say goodbye to past practices, and measure. But make sure you're measuring the right things, because if not, you're going to get the wrong results. Remember the key takeaways that we are looking to achieve here? Culture is the essence of who you are. It's not casual. It's essential. If you don't create a strong culture, people will create a culture that fits them, that makes up their story. And those who have been around a long time will dominate, not the future, but the past. It's their beliefs, behaviors, and ways of doing things. Now, changing that is the challenge. but it can be done with a process. You're changing people's behaviors. It's a little like Weight Watchers. You need to get on the scale to do the right measures. You need a lot of a code to make sure that is in fact what you want it to be. And you need to be able to check in sometimes at a group session. There are well-researched, highly validated methods you can do for assessing your culture today. And the OCAI is the one we like. There may be another that you prefer. It's how you are now and how you prefer to be. The beginning is that graph. What do your folks want it to become? Because if they don't want it to be what you want, you may need new folks. Try this. You can do it for free before you invest in it and see what they can do to help you change. And for it to stick, you're going to have to sustain small wins and keep explaining why until the new norms become the habits for the organization you want to create for tomorrow. Nothing is easy, but nothing is impossible. And in fact, if the problems of today are the same ones of yesterday, we really haven't solved anything. And the times they are changing, as Bob Dylan sang for us so well, the times they are indeed changing. For us, for questions, I'd be delighted for you to email me at info@andisimon.com, A-N-D-I, Simon.com, info@andisimon.com for your questions. It would be a pleasure to answer them for you. It's been so much fun to meet with you. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure to do Culture Change. Bye now.